Yes, sir. It's going to be good. It's going to be great. I love it. Let's go. All right, all right, all right. Thank you so much here. It is I, Big J all day, aka the mighty Big J, and you are tuned into another edition of the Hype Show. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are new to the channel, please be sure to like this video, comment, and subscribe. And if this isn't your first time, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Episode 17. We're going to talk about the Thursday night results from the Monday night or the Thursday night game between the Jaguars and the Saints. We'll kind of go over today's action that's going to be taking place over the course of the day today, including the Sunday night football game between the Miami Dolphins visiting the Philadelphia Eagles. That's at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. That's going to be a good game. Definitely looking forward to that. Another game I'm looking forward to, the Monday night football game where the San Francisco 49ers will be traveling to visit the Minnesota Vikings. That's going to be Monday, October 23rd, so tomorrow night, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, US Bank Stadium. That'll be on ESPN. Again, the Vikings, they're 2-4. The 49ers 5-1. We'll talk about that game at the end of the broadcast, and I'll have a prediction for you. The team's not playing this week here, week 7. That is the Cincinnati Bengals, the Dallas Cowboys, the Tennessee Titans, the New York Jets, the Carolina Panthers, and the Houston Texans. Those teams do not have games this weekend. So interesting weekend. We're definitely going to see some teams here kind of change things for the better and see what they do. And then on the flip side, some teams may be going towards the bottom. So we'll just kind of have to see how these things pan out. The first game we're going to talk about here was the Thursday night matchup here. Again, the Jaguars visiting the New Orleans Saints. The Jaguars got the victory by a final of 31-24, improving their record to 5-2. They had 3-0 away from home, actually. The Saints fall to 3-4. They started out the season 2-0, but are just 1-4 since. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence was 20 of 29 for 204 yards and a touchdown. For the Saints, Derek Carr was 33 of 55 for 301 yards and a touchdown, but he did have an interception as well. Trevor Lawrence was also the leading receiver for Jacksonville with 8 carries for 59 yards. Travis Etienne followed that up with 14 carries for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. For the New Orleans Saints, Alvin Kamara has had 17 carries for 62 yards, but he did a lot of damage receiving the football as well. He had 12 catches for 91 yards. He didn't find the end zone, but he had 153 yards from scrimmage for the game. Taysom Hill was next rushing the football with 5 carries for 18 yards. They had 112 yards as a team running the football. For the receiving for Jacksonville, Christian Kirk had 6 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. He had a 44-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter that kind of sealed things for Jacksonville. Evan Ingram, the tight end, was behind him with 5 catches for 45 yards, and running back Jamal Agnew had 4 catches for 36 yards. For the receiving for New Orleans, as I stated, Kamara was the leading receiver. Chris Olave had 7 catches for 57 yards. And Taysom Hill had 4 catches for 50 yards. He's kind of like their Swiss Army knife. Michael Thomas did find the end zone and had 3 catches for 42 yards for the day. What kind of did this, the Saints in, despite the fact that they didn't have as great of a game as Jacksonville did, they turned the ball over more than Jacksonville. The thing that I noticed, the thing that really stood out for me is that New Orleans was still in it because of the amount of yardage they got on the ground. They got more yards on the ground on offense than Jacksonville did. But what unfortunately did them in is a play late in the fourth quarter when Derek Carr tried to get the ball to tight end Foster Moreau. He had him wide open for a touchdown, and the ball literally went right off of his hands in the end zone. That would have been a touchdown, and they would have been able to possibly tie the game at that point, or if they went for 2, who knows. But that was what really did New Orleans in, despite the blunders that they had. They actually outscored the Jaguars 18-14 in the second half of the game. They were losing at halftime 17-6. So I feel like they had what it took to win this game, but Jacksonville just played better down the stretch than New Orleans did. New Orleans had more points on the board, but when it counted, they just couldn't put it in there. It's just unfortunate. And Foster Moreau, I feel bad for the guy. He was pretty much dejected on the bench, and a lot of his teammates came to console him, but when you know that that game is in your hands, unfortunately, it still doesn't really matter much. This is his fifth season out of LSU. He was actually picked by the Oakland Raiders at the time when they were still in Oakland. That was their last year, I believe, second to last year. And he actually was diagnosed with a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma earlier in the year during camp, and he was able to fight his way back from that. So he's a resilient guy. It's clearly been shown, but he just unfortunately wasn't able to haul in the catch for him, and they ended up losing that game. So the Saints, unfortunately for them, they're now 3-4, and they're sitting at third in their division. Tampa Bay and Atlanta have games later today, so we'll have to see how they do. And Carolina has a bye week at 0-6, so you're not really worried about them. They're sitting at the bottom anyway. For the Saints, I don't know. Ever since that butt whooping they gave New England about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, they've lost their last two games. They lost at Houston in a heartbreaker last week, and then they turned around and lost to Jacksonville this past Thursday. So it seems to me, based on the way they've won their games so far, they beat up on the teams that aren't as good. And that's kind of how it's supposed to be, but at the same time, they have to show that they can beat teams that are not that are like at their level or above their level, and they just haven't shown it. So, looking at the Saints here, as far as their schedule after that game this past Thursday here, looking ahead to the rest of their schedule, I just don't. Again, I've been calling these Saints results, and I've kind of been right and wrong about this team. And as far as they go, they're very average. They're 3-4 for a reason. They're a very average football team. So that's the way I see it here. They're at Indianapolis a week from today here at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're home for the Bears, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, November 5th. They're at Minnesota, November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they head into their bye week. Then November 26th, they're at the Atlanta Falcons, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then home versus Detroit, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. So this game to me, it was just another example of them not taking advantage of their opportunities at the end. That's kind of how it was last week against Houston when they lost that game 20-13. They didn't take advantage of late opportunities. And the game that they lost at Green Bay, going all the way back to week 3 by a final of 18-17, they lost that game by 1 point because of late opportunities. So I just feel like Derek Carr needs to get on the same page with his wide receivers. The defense hasn't been bad. They're a top 10 defense, but Derek Carr needs to develop some sort of chemistry with his wide receivers, more specifically Chris Olave. There was a lot of points in the game where him and Chris Olave were not in sync at all as far as the routes to run, as where the ball was going, things of that nature. There was a point in the third quarter where Chris Olave stopped on a route and Carr just launched the ball down the field. And he was like very animated and very livid about that. But at the same time, that's on you too. It's not just on the wide receivers. You got to know which reads to call and make sure that they know what you're calling. This is your first season with the team, so there's a lot of kinks you got to work out. So I put that on Derek Carr too. It's not just the receivers. Until they get it together, I just feel like this team just doesn't have a lot of. They just don't have a lot of potential in my eyes until they work it out. They're much like a lot of other teams. They have good players on their team, but they just don't have a fully blown team that's going to really scare people. So we'll just have to see how they play down the stretch. But looking at their next 5 games, they have a possibility of being anywhere from 3-2 to 1-4 just because of how they play. They're just not very consistent. So it's really hard to say with with the Saints at this time. As far as Jacksonville, they improved to 5-2. And as far as I'm concerned, they look really good. Keep in mind that they won 2 games. They won 4 games in the past basically 2.5 weeks, and they've done it on 2 different continents. They won games against Atlanta and Buffalo in England before coming home against Indy and then having a Thursday night game. So that's a lot of football played within a few weeks. So the Jaguars are definitely showing that resilient considering they traveled across 2 different countries. They're at Pittsburgh next Sunday, October 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before heading into a bye week. November 12th, they're home against the 49ers. That's going to take place 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. The 19th of November, they're home against the Tennessee Titans, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Houston. November 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They have a Monday Night Football game the following week, home against the Cincinnati Bengals, December 4th. That's at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Then 6 days later, they host the Cleveland Browns, December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So Outside of the San Francisco game, I don't really see a lot of difficulty ahead for the Tennessee Titans. And even with San Francisco, they took their first L last week to Cleveland because Cleveland played great defense, and also because they lost a couple players to injury. Debo Samuel's actually out for the Monday night game with a hairline fracture in his shoulder. So everybody else is going to be available for San Francisco, but Cleveland may have provided a blueprint for how to beat the Niners. So we'll just have to see down the stretch. But Jacksonville, as I stated, they're one of the top few teams in the AFC for sure. Like when you look at the AFC, the teams that immediately jump out to you are going to be Kansas City, Miami, Buffalo, and Jacksonville, as far as I'm concerned. As far as who that fifth spot could be, that might be Baltimore, but the AFC North is pretty shaky. The AFC North is shaking. The AFC South is everybody's kind of in the same boat, with the exception of Jacksonville. So it's just as a whole, things sort themselves out from week to week. But I really like Jacksonville down the stretch. I definitely am very interested to see what they do next week because at Pittsburgh is going to be tough. But if they can play the way that they did against the Saints, I think they got a good shot of winning that football game. Excuse me. All right. So the next game we're going to talk about here, well, that was the Thursday night matchup here. We're going to get into the games taking place here later today. The first game we're going to talk about here is the Bills traveling to Gillette Stadium to face the New England Patriots. That game's going to be taking place at 1 p.m. Eastern. All these games I'm going to talk about are going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern first before we get to the afternoon schedule. The Bills, excuse me, are favored by 7.5. That's actually the most that a team has been favored at Gillette Stadium in 20 years. And it makes sense. The Patriots are not a good football team. And the way I see it, the Bills should roll. It is an AFC East matchup, but what can happen with a lot of these matchups is that the teams know each other so well that the teams could probably have a little bit closer games. I don't foresee that as that happening today, but it's typically something that can occur with a lot of rivalry games within the division. But give me the Bills to win this game. The Patriots just haven't shown any kind of positivity at all. And looking back on their lone victory over the Jets at the Jets, they probably shouldn't have got that. I think the Jets were still shell-shocked over the loss of Aaron Rodgers a couple weeks prior. And I think the Patriots stole that game. Because looking at the Jets now, the way that they've played the last couple weeks, between the way they beat up on Denver and the way they beat up on the Cowboys a week ago heading into their bye week this week, the Jets are definitely a better team than the Patriots to me, even without Aaron Rodgers. So I just think the Patriots might have stole that one. This team could easily be an 0-6 football team, and I can see them losing today's games and becoming a 1-6 football team. This is the first time the Patriots have been 1-5 at this time since the '95 season, and with the loss today, that would be the first time they've been 1-6 since 1993. So 30 years. It just goes to show you the excellence and consistency the Patriots had prior to 2020. And I'm just not sure because when you look at that depth chart and you look at that roster, who's really going to be a better option at quarterback beyond Mac Jones? I mean, you have Bailey Zappi. They've thrown him in there on a couple different occasions, but they haven't really given him a consistent chance to start because they still believe in Mac Jones. You have Malik Cunningham on the practice squad, but he's like a Swiss Army knife. He can play quarterback, he can play receiver, he can play a couple different positions. And then Will Greer, he was on the practice squad for the Cowboys during camp, and they actually released him, and he's been with a few different teams over the course of his career. So it's just hard to say as far as what they're really going to do as a team because you don't have any options beyond Mac Jones at quarterback. So you have to stick with Mac Jones. But like I said, I'm taking the Bills to win this football game. If it's not a rout, I would be shocked, but it's definitely going to be one of those situations where the Patriots are probably looking at a high draft pick. After today's game, the Bills have a Thursday nighter against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. It's going to be taking place at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video before they travel to Cincinnati for Sunday Night Football on November 5th on NBC. The next game after that for Buffalo is actually Monday Night Football when they host the Denver Broncos November 13th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Then they host the Jets that following Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The Buffalo Bills, looking at them going forward, the loss that they took to Jacksonville, that loss looks very much believable now because, again, that was in England, so there was really no home field advantage of any kind. unless you're Jacksonville, because they had played the prior week against Atlanta. So that's what gave them kind of a home field. If it was a situation where both teams were just coming into England, I could have seen Buffalo taking that game. But Jacksonville looks a little bit more for real to me than they did at that time 2 weeks ago. So as far as Buffalo goes, that loss to the Jets at the beginning of the season may come back to haunt them, because by the time they see the Jets again, the Jets may be a better team. Again, that was the same night they lost Aaron Rodgers. So for the Bills, looking at these games coming up here, I'll have a prediction for each of them, but the ones that jump out, I could see them winning these two games, both this week against New England and Tampa, and then beating Denver for sure. I don't see Denver winning more than two more games. They're probably going to be 4-13. And then the game in the middle, squeezed in between with at Cincinnati, we'll have to see, because that's going to be a matchup on Sunday Night Football. But that game's going to be very intriguing. I'm going to take Buffalo for now, but hey, anything can happen in these next few weeks here, certainly. As far as the New England Patriots, they're visiting Miami next week at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're home against the Washington Commanders November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern. They travel to Germany to take on the Colts November 12th. That's 9:30 p.m. Eastern. It's an international matchup here. And then the following week here, they're at the New York Giants. They're actually at the New York Giants 2 weeks after that, because they have a bye once they face Indianapolis and Germany. So over the next 6 weeks, who knows? The Patriots just don't show that they can beat anybody. I mean, if you lose to the Raiders and the Saints are blowing you out at home, who are you really going to beat? This is the same question I asked with teams like Denver, Chicago, Carolina, the New York Giants. When you're at the bottom like that, who are you really going to beat? The Arizona Cardinals, they're 1-5, and their one victory is against the Cowboys, sure, but they can't beat anybody else. So from week to week, a team that's towards the bottom of the standings can get a team towards the top, but when you're looking at the schedule and you're looking at the stats and the records and things of that nature, you're not going to think that to yourself. So if New England gets a victory in the next 5 to 6 weeks, I would be shocked. But it could be the Commanders or the Colts in Germany, but I don't see them winning today or at Miami next week. I just don't see it. Maybe the Giants in November, they could get that victory, because the Giants are in a world of hurt as well. But the Patriots are going to probably be 4-13, 5-12, in my opinion. At 1-5 right now, that would mean they would go 4-7. That's pretty close to what they are right now if you look at the averages and prognosticate things. So those Tom Brady days are over if you're a Patriots fan. Plain and simple, those days are done. Another game we're going to take a look at here and talk about here. Let's see. Oh yeah, the Chicago Bears are going to be hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. That game is taking place on Fox at Soldier Field, 1 p.m. Eastern. The Raiders are favored by 2, but both of the starting quarterbacks are out. The backup quarterbacks are starting today here. Justin Fields suffered a dislocated thumb on his throwing hand, so he's going to be out. And Jimmy Garoppolo, he suffered a back injury. He took a helmet directly to the back last week. I saw that play. So he's going to be out as well. So stepping in for each of these teams here is going to be the backup quarterbacks. The Raiders are going to be starting. Let me go back here. Actually, the Raiders are going to be starting Brian Hoyer at quarterback. They tried Aiden O'Connell the last time that they started, and it just didn't really work out. He was all right. So they're going to turn to Brian Hoyer, the 15-year veteran, instead of Aiden O'Connell. And for the Bears, they're going to be starting undrafted rookie Tyson Bagent out of Shepherd University. I touched on him a little bit last week. I hadn't heard of that school until this year. So they're going to be going with the unproven rookie to make the throws here today. He got strip sacked last week, and it led to a 42-yard touchdown by Minnesota's Jordan Hicks. And that's what put the game away for them. Minnesota didn't play that great on offense, but with Justin Fields coming out, they didn't really need to, because the defense did what they had to against that rookie. So this game, for me, if you're a Raiders fan or a Bears fan, this is probably going to be one of the most least interesting games on the schedule by far. Not very interesting game at all here. As far as the Raiders being favored by 2, I could see that. I could see the Raiders winning today in Chicago today. These teams aren't very good, but at the same time, when you have the quarterbacks out for each team, it's kind of a toss-up. When a team is favored by 2 points, that sounds like a toss-up to me. So I'll take the Raiders in a close one, but if the Bears took it and got their second one, that wouldn't shock me too much, because these are the Raiders. The Raiders travel to Chicago next week for Monday Night Football at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Then they head back home to host the Giants November 5th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Then they host the Jets for Sunday Night Football the following week, November 12th. Then they're traveling to Miami to face the Dolphins 1 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on CBS before they're home against the Chiefs that following week, November 26th. So again, I'll take the Raiders to win today. I'm not. They're not sure when Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be back. Jimmy Garoppolo, if you look at his injury history, he gets a lot of nicks and scratches throughout the year. Anyway, this is one of the worst injuries he's had. He's had injuries that were worse than this, but this is easily one of those injuries where you look at and you say easily could see him out a couple weeks because that's just kind of the nature of who Jimmy Garoppolo is, and that's the nature of the game. So I'm going to take the Raiders today close simply because the Bears are the Bears. But with the Bears being at home, this game is a toss-up. I'm just taking the Raiders simply because they have Devontae Adams. They still have Devontae Adams, and he's still great at what he does. Get him the ball today. And if Josh Jacobs can do what he does, then that's the thing. They just have players on their side of the ball. Chicago they're down to their third running back actually here because Khalil Herbert, he was already placed on IR after the Commanders game a few weeks ago. And then last week, the other running backs, Travis Homer, he got injured, and then Roshan Johnson, he suffered a concussion, so he's out. So they're basically to their fourth running back. So Chicago, they weren't good with all their guys, and now they're missing guys. I'll take the Raiders for now, but beyond that, the Raiders, to me, a game against the Giants and Jets, those could be victories in November, but it's hard to say because things happen from week to week. Who knows how long Jimmy Garoppolo will be out? Who knows what kind of injuries the other teams will have? Football is crazy from week to week, and that's the thing that'll always remain the same. Football from week to week is always going to be a rough game, and it's always dangerous. So the Raiders today, I'm going to take them to lose, and we'll just have to see how they do on a week to week basis. The Chicago Bears, on the flip side, they're kind of in the same boat. They're playing for a top spot. And who's to say how long Justin Fields will be out? His one thing about the thumb on his throwing hand with it dislocated, they were able to get it back in the socket. But the problem is he's having issues with gripping the ball, his grip strength. So this is going to be a week-to-week thing, and they'll probably see how he is before they make the trip to Los Angeles next week to face the Chargers for Sunday Night Football, October 29th. And if he's not available and if he's not able to grip the ball, if they sense any kind of issues, he may not be available for that game either. The following week, they're at the New Orleans Saints, November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before their Thursday nighter against the Panthers, November 9th. So they got a few more games coming up within a couple weeks after today. So Justin Fields' availability will kind of just depend on his healing process, how he's able to grip the ball, things of that nature. So they're going to be playing it by ear with Justin Fields. And for me, the Chicago Bears, they just have so many question marks this season right off the bat. Is Justin Fields going to be their guy next year at quarterback? Because you have to remember here, this is maybe his third year with the team, and that's not a lot of time. But the coach and general manager that drafted Justin Fields to the Chicago Bears aren't there anymore. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, they're out. So you're dealing with a new coach and GM, and they're going to say that's not their guy. And if they finish bad enough, they're going to probably want another quarterback. Justin Fields could help out a team. I just don't know if it's the Bears. If you traded Justin Fields to another team that could use a quarterback, they're using a backup quarterback or a guy hasn't proven anything in a few years as well. He could help them, but the Chicago Bears are just a mess right now. So it's just kind of hard to say what they're going to do for their future, but it's looking pretty bleak today. I even have them losing to the Raiders today. So what does that tell you? On the next game we're going to talk about here, the Indianapolis Colts are hosting the Cleveland Browns. That game is taking place 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS at Lucas Oil Stadium. Cleveland is favored by 3. Deshaun Watson is actually going to be playing today. He was actually out the last couple weeks with the shoulder issue, but he is active. Dorian Thompson Robinson, who started 2 weeks ago in his place, is actually inactive today. So Deshaun Watson's getting the start, and PJ Walker will be his backup. As far as the Colts, however, Anthony Richardson, he's going to be out for the rest of the season. He had to have surgery on that shoulder, so Gardner Minshew will be taking over and taking the rest of the snaps here unless something else happens here. Gardner Minshew has 882 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So he's more than capable of taking over this team. Anthony Richardson, he'll just have to come back for his sophomore season and just take what he learned from this year and just see if he can apply that and be a better quarterback. The Jacksonville Jaguars did get the win last week at Houston. I'm sorry, they did lose at Jacksonville 37-20. So they're 3-2 as a football team, and the Cleveland Browns are also 3-2 as well. I'm sorry, the Colts are 3-3. They haven't had their bye yet. Cleveland for me, they looked really good against San Francisco last week, and that defense is what brought it to them. And Indianapolis's defense is not nearly as dynamic as San Francisco was, and they were able to keep the Niners in check. That's why I'm going to take the Browns to win this football game today. They looked really good on defense against the Niners, so I'm going to take the Browns to win this one. As far as the Colts, this team to me, they had plans to play their young guys to see how their young guys would be for the future. Guys like Anthony Richardson, as I mentioned. Josh Downs, he's a wide receiver they drafted in the third round out of North Carolina. They want to see more from him to go along with having Michael Pittman Jr., things of that nature. And I feel like this is going to be another project year for the Colts, much like it has been in years past. So they're 3-3, and again, I got them losing today. They're going to be hosting the Saints next week, October 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're then at the Carolina Panthers November 5th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they travel to Germany to face the Patriots November 12th. They have a bye week after they go to Germany, and then November 26th, they're hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern. So the Colts, it's just kind of a mixed bag, but I could see them being a 2-3 football team, including today's loss. If the Browns find a way to lose this game, I would be very shocked because that would indicate to me that you were just bringing it to the Niners simply because they're one of the better teams and you just weren't really that fully serious or committed. That's what that would indicate to me, honestly. On the flip side, though, I just don't know if the Colts are going to beat anything here today. Because looking at these 5 games, I could see them taking the New England Patriots and winning that football game heading into their bye week in November. But they just don't have the pieces. Now, hosting the Saints is going to be very interesting. If their defense can force a couple of turnovers, they may be able to stay in that game. But the Saints, like I said, they have great pieces on offense, as I was talking about with the Jacksonville game. So if the Saints take that game against them, I wouldn't be shocked. But Indianapolis, they're basically going to be playing for next year. I don't see them being a playoff team, and I just don't see where the victories are. They're going to surprise some teams, and some guys are going to get hurt, but I just don't see the Colts being a factor at any point in the season here. We'll just have to see how they do down the stretch, but at 3-3, that just screams average, or if not worse. That's average at best. The next game we're going to talk about here is the Giants hosting the Commanders. That's going to be taking place at MetLife Stadium. The Commanders are favored by 3 to win this game. The Giants are a 1-5 football team, as the Commanders are 3-3. I'm going to take the Commanders as well to win this football game. Sam Howell, he actually isn't having a bad year. Even though Washington is a 3-3 football team, Sam Howell has 1,500 passing yards already with 9 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So I just don't. I feel like Washington, they're just trying to work out kinks and get it together. This is a new coaching staff here with you bringing in Eric Bieniemy as your offensive coordinator, so you're getting acclimated to the play calling and whatnot there as well. And as far as the Giants go, Daniel Jones is out. He's going to be also inactive for today's game as well with a neck injury. So that alone is going to make the offense very predictable. You're most likely going to be putting the ball in Saquon Barkley's hands. And I feel like the Commanders are going to bury the Giants even deeper into the division and into the conference today. I just don't see the Giants winning this football game. If the Giants found a way to win this game, that would show their resilience and their moxie, the resiliency that they have. But I just don't see them winning this football game here today. I'm going to take Washington to win this game by a touchdown. They just have more pieces in place, and they just don't have as many injuries to key players. So give me Washington to win this football game. The Giants, that would put them at 1-6 in the division. The Dallas Cowboys, as I mentioned, aren't playing today, and they're 4-2. And Philadelphia is hosting Miami later tonight for the Sunday night football game. So I just look at this team, I just think Saquon Barkley, if I'm Saquon Barkley, they did franchise you and they gave you the 1-year deal and they paid Daniel Jones. You have a lot more leverage coming to the table for a contract next season for Saquon Barkley, in my opinion, because with Daniel Jones in the lineup, that team was having a rough time, and without him, it was even worse. Darren Waller is their leading receiver with 28 catches for 282 yards, but he hasn't found the end zone yet. That's what you brought him in for via trade from the Raiders. He's an asset, but with Daniel Jones back there, for or lack thereof, they just haven't been able to find a touchdown with him. So yeah, the Giants to me is just this is one of those situations where you're canceling Christmas. They're definitely taking a couple steps back from 2022 because at least they were a playoff team and they were able to get a victory over Minnesota and an upset to get to the divisional round. So if you're the Giants, you're definitely taking a huge step back from last year. Like I said, looking at the Commanders here, after they win today here, prognosticating their win, they'll be home against the Philadelphia Eagles October 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they travel to New England November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. Then they're at the Seattle Seahawks November 12th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they come back home to face the Giants again November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So I could see the Commanders taking both from the Giants, and they're gonna play. They're gonna take the victory at New England as well. I was talking about New England's schedule earlier, and I wasn't sure, but I'm gonna say the Commanders take that one because I like their defensive line, and Mac Jones is gonna have a rough day. I could see him throwing a pick six or throwing an interception that's returned to get the other team into territory to score a touchdown. So I'm gonna take the Commanders at that time. But the Philadelphia game next week, that's going to be a tough one. Even though they're hosting Philadelphia, they played at Philadelphia a few weeks prior, and they did lose the game 34-31 back in week 4. But they played Philadelphia tough, in my opinion, at Philadelphia. So we'll just have to see how that game is next week. I'll call that game as far as an official result, but I want to see how Washington plays today. If they could decimate the Giants, that'll give them some nice momentum coming into that game. On the flip side, as I was talking about with the Giants, looking at their schedule over the next 5 weeks, I just don't see where the wins happen. They're home against the Jets next week, home, because again, as I've stated before, they share a stadium. They're at the Las Vegas Raiders November 5th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Dallas Cowboys 4:25 p.m. Eastern November 12th. And the Dallas already gave them that whooping, so I don't expect that to change at all. And then, like I said, they're back home against they're at the Washington Commanders November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern. I just don't see where the wins are coming from. I expect them to lose today. And then the thing about the Jets game is that even though it's a home game, a couple of things to consider here. The Jets are going to be coming off of a bye week, which means they'll be fresher than the Giants. And at the same time, they share a stadium. So the setting will be familiar for the Jets, even though there's going to be Giants stuff everywhere. The setting is going to be familiar. So I'm going to take the Giants to lose that game against the Jets. The Jets are the better team. They got it together. At 3-3 heading into their bye week with those 2 wins against the Broncos and Eagles, they definitely got it together. Zach Wilson hasn't played great, but he hasn't been awful. He hasn't been the reason why they've lost football games. So I'm going to take the Jets to win those games here. The Giants, they got a lot of work to do, and they're probably going to be drafted in a high spot again in the lottery. They drafted kind of lower in the first round because they were a second round team in the playoffs last year. This year, they're going to have a higher draft pick, and I would strongly suggest a wide receiver and an offensive lineman as their first 2 picks in the draft. That's going to help them out tremendously because that line hasn't been able to protect Daniel Jones. And at the same time, if they're all the way in the backfield, that's not going to give the ability to Barkley to get those yards and give him space to move and do what he does. So a wide receiver and an offensive lineman, the Giants are going to need those. That's me personally. We'll have to see what they do, but that's just what sticks out right now. Another game we're going to talk about here on the 1 p.m. Eastern slot, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are home, and they're going to be hosting the Atlanta Falcons. That game is taking place at Raymond James Stadium. At this point in time, I'm taking Tampa Bay to win this game. I like Tampa huge in this game. And for me, the biggest reason why, Desmond Ridder, for the Atlanta Falcons, he has 6 touchdowns, but he has 8 turnovers. He has 6 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles. So they're still trying to figure it out with him. This is his second season. He took over for Marcus Mariota late last season. Marcus Mariota was the starter coming into 2022, and he was the rookie. And he took over late for Marcus Mariota coming into the season. So this is still essentially kind of a rookie season for him. This is only his ninth start for the Atlanta Falcons. He started 2 games at the end, and then he started the 6th here this season. So this will be start number 9. Baker Mayfield has 1,088 passing yards to 7 touchdowns and 3 interceptions as well. And he's going to be looking to bounce back and get that victory. They didn't play that well coming off of their bye week against Detroit last week. And I'm definitely thinking that they're looking to bounce back. They're going to be the host team again this week because Atlanta, their last few games were at home. Well, they had the Jacksonville game October 1st, and they hosted Houston and Washington. So this will be their first road game in almost a month, technically speaking. And I just don't see them coming away with the victory. This is an NFC South matchup, and I got Tampa Bay rolling on this one. The spread, again, is Tampa. They're favored by 3, but I think it'll be more than that. I think it'll be by a touchdown, 10 points to win that game. The NFC South is less than imposing and less than scary, as I've always stated. It's a very muddled division, but Tampa Bay sticks out as the best team. Tampa Bay is the clear-cut best team. Carolina is the worst. They're at the bottom at 0-6. And Atlanta and New Orleans, with the way New Orleans has played the last couple weeks, I just don't know if they're a good team or not. And Atlanta, we'll have to see what they're made of, but they just haven't played that well either. That game last week with Washington, the reason why Washington was able to win that game the way they did, even though they won by 8 points, Atlanta had 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions by Ritter. So it's just one of those situations where if a few plays here and there, Washington could be 4-2, but they could be easily 2-4 also. So I don't know what they are. But give me Tampa to win this football game here today. I'm looking at the scheduling here. I'm going to look at Atlanta here. As after they lose the game today, they're at Tennessee the following week, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. At Tennessee will be coming off of their bye week, so they'll be fresh and they'll be going to Tennessee. So that could be dangerous for Atlanta. The following week, they're hosting the Minnesota Vikings, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 5th, before they travel to Arizona, November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they head into their bye week. The following week, when they come off a bye, they're home against the New Orleans Saints, November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So the Falcons, to me, I still got them a notch below the Saints, even though the Saints that blew that game the other night. I still have Atlanta as probably the 3rd best team in this division. Carolina's the clear-cut worst, but with Carolina's talent and later in the season, Atlanta doesn't even see Carolina until December again. They won their first game to start the year, but against Carolina later in the year at Carolina, I can see Carolina putting together a victory. That's a ways down the road, and we'll talk about that, but this Atlanta team, I could see them splitting with their divisional rivals with the exception of Tampa. I think Tampa will take both of those, and that starts here today. At Tennessee, if they can get Derrick Henry going and keep that clock moving, I could see Tennessee taking that game too. Like I said, at Arizona, November 12th is the closest thing I see to a victory for them, but we'll just have to see because, like I said, as these games keep going and as things go from week to week, things are going to change and things are going to happen to players. There's transactions that occur, injuries that are happening. The trade deadline is actually a week from Tuesday, October 31st. So if there are any trades that occur, they'll be happening probably this week. But like I said, things can happen. The NFL is crazy. But for Atlanta, their future looks very bleak. I just don't see this team as a team winning very many games. They've already won 3. Like I stated, they're a 3-3 football team. But they're just very inconsistent, and Desmond Ritter just really needs to work on keeping that ball in his hands and controlling the game. So Atlanta, like I said, I got them losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers today. The Buccaneers, obviously, they're going to be heading to Buffalo, as I stated earlier, for their Thursday night football matchup here on October 26th. I'll have a prediction for that game on Thursday for you, but that's going to be a hostile environment for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to Buffalo. Their next game isn't for another 10 days, though. They travel to Houston, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 5th on CBS. I got them taking that game most likely, but Houston's been a very feisty team. They've been fighting in every game that they've been in, and it indicates in the way that they play. They haven't been blown out by anybody. They've done the blowing out themselves. So the Tennessee Titans, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be home against them November 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to San Francisco November 19th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Tampa Bay, I got them winning today here, but their next 3 and 4 games are going to be tough. They're going to be at Buffalo, at Houston. Those aren't going to be cakewalks by any means. Houston has played tough football, and they're taking on all comers. With the Tennessee game here, I think that game is going to be a fight because of the fact that it's an AFC South matchup, and these teams know each other really well. Oh, I'm sorry, the Buccaneers, with them facing the Tennessee Titans, that game is going to come down to the running game. I apologize. because with Derrick Henry, he's always going to be the number one option for them because at quarterback, Ryan Tannehill, he's very average to mid. He can be very bad and he can have okay games. He's never really had a game where he's like 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He doesn't have games like that consistently. He's had them, but he just doesn't have them all the time. So if Tampa Bay can put a clamp on Derrick Henry, I'll see them taking that game. But they'll lose at San Francisco. Traveling cross country to face the 49ers is not a recipe for success. So I'm looking at Tampa Bay. They could easily be a 3-2 football team over the next 5 weeks. We'll just have to see week to week how things go, as I always say. But Tampa Bay's in pretty good shape. They lead their division and they had their bye week already. So by virtue, they lead their teams by half a game to a game. So like I said, we'll just have to see what they do down the stretch. But I like Tampa today. Another about her taking place at 1 p.m. Eastern here, the last game of the 1 p.m. Eastern slate before we switch to the afternoon games. That's going to be the Baltimore Ravens hosting the Detroit Lions. That's taking place at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore. Baltimore is actually favored by 3 in this game. I think the last time that this team faced Baltimore, interestingly enough, was in Detroit a while back. And that's actually when Justin Tucker kicked a 66-yard field goal to win the game. And that was actually a record setter at that time. That was 2 seasons ago. So this Detroit team has come a long way. They're 5-1. Jared Goff has 1,618 passing yards with 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. So he's having an MVP caliber year, in my opinion. With the Lions being 5-1, he has to be in the conversation. The Ravens are 4-2, and they're still looking to get things going. As far as I'm concerned, Lamar Jackson, he's just waiting to have a breakout game. I don't know if it'll be today, but he's still waiting to have one of those games where he just breaks out and just goes crazy. I still think that's in the cards for them. Baltimore is favored by 3 to win this game. This is going to be probably the toughest pick of the day because I really like the Lions, and they're 3-0 on the road. So I don't know if home will be a factor for this game today because I like the way the Lions are playing football. The only game that they lost, the Seattle game, Seattle just played over their skis on offense and they made some plays down the stretch. But the Lions could easily be 6-0 right now. And the Ravens at 4-2 have been very underwhelming. They've been all right. They haven't done anything to show me that they're cream of the crop yet. As I stated earlier in the broadcast, I feel like they're the 5th probably best team in the AFC right now. David Montgomery is out for the Lions with a rib injury, and he's probably going to miss a couple more games after today as well. You know what? I'm going to take the Lions close. I'm going to take the Lions close to win this football game. They're favoring Baltimore, but I'm going to take the Lions close to win this football game. The Baltimore Ravens, as I stated, they just haven't really blown me away. They've been all right. They haven't been awful, but they haven't been great. Zay Flowers, the number 1 wide receiver, picked 23rd in the first round out of Boston College. He's been their best wide receiver as I expected. Odell Beckham, he's not that guy anymore that he was with the Giants when he was making plays, the one-handed catch over the shoulder against Dallas, one of the more infamous catches in NFL history. He's not that guy anymore, in my opinion. He's just not. Those days are done. He's a serviceable receiver, but he's not like a number 1 guy. And I honestly believe that that's why the Ravens took him on a 1-year deal. They didn't give him a 2-3-year deal. So overall, yeah, I got the Lions winning this game, even though it's in Baltimore. I'm going to take the Lions. If Baltimore can win this game, it's because they got contribution from everywhere. With the Lions, though, they're just a really well put together team. And even without David Montgomery, they can still put together some points on offense. So I'm going to take the Lions close. The Baltimore Ravens are at Arizona next week, November 29th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're home the next couple of games. They're home against Seattle the following week, November 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they're home against the Cleveland Browns, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before they host the Cincinnati Bengals November 16th for Thursday Night Football. So they play Cleveland and Cincinnati that same week. That's going to be tough. Cleveland and Cincinnati, with those being back-to-back AFC North matchups, that's going to be tough. Give me Detroit today to win against them. I can see Baltimore taking the Arizona game, even though it's at Arizona, and then I could see them taking Seattle, and they're going to split the Cleveland Cincinnati games. I'm not sure which way that split is going to go, but I could see them winning one of those games and losing one of those games. So that would put them at 3-2 over their next 5 weeks. If they're able to get a victory today, that would put them at 4-1, in my opinion. So that's going to be huge for them. But Baltimore, their division is still kind of too close to tell who's going to do what. Cincinnati, they may be 3-3 and at the bottom of the division, but I expect them to rise from the ashes and become a better team down the stretch. So no, there's no reason to sleep on any of these teams yet because they all have something good going for them. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. They all have something to worry about, but they all have something good going for them as well. Now, looking at the Lions' schedule after today here, like I said, they'll get the win before they head back home to host the Raiders for Monday Night Football next week, October 30th. Then they have their bye week. Having that bye week after this is going to be key for getting David Montgomery back because they said a rib cartilage issue can take weeks. It's something he's going to have to deal with over the course of weeks. So with him missing today, he could miss the Raiders game too. But if they can get him back after just a 2-game injury, that'll be huge because they'll be at the Los Angeles Chargers November 12th, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they'll be back home for the next 2 games. They're home against the Chicago Bears November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then on Thanksgiving Day, they kick off the Thanksgiving Day schedule as they always do, and they'll be hosting the Green Bay Packers Thanksgiving Day on Fox. So in my opinion, the Lions, even with the loss of David Montgomery, I still got them winning today. And the loss, I don't really know where the next loss is going to be, in all honesty. I just don't know. Because their game, they've got the Bears a couple times, the Packers, they got the Broncos, that's a win. And they're hosting the Broncos on top of that. So their toughest game left on their schedule isn't until towards the end of the schedule when they're at the Dallas Cowboys week 17. That's going to be a huge game. But the Lions, things happen from week to week, but I'm not really worried about the Lions. I'm really not. The Green Bay, they're up on Green Bay by 2.5 games, and they're up by Minnesota a full 3 games already. So, as I've already stated, this is their division to lose. I'm going to talk about Green Bay and Denver here in a second, as I got Green Bay winning that game. But Detroit, this is their division to lose, and I just don't see where the losses are coming. Things are happening week to week in football, as we always say. I'm going to repeat that plenty of times. But the Detroit Lions, they just look like a great football team. They just look solid. They have everybody everywhere. And with the right contributions and with the right head coach and Dan Campbell, this team is going to be a playoff team this year. They haven't made the playoffs in a while, but I got them winning this division. Plain and simple here. Looking at the next games here, like we're going to talk about here, these games are going to be taking place, the next couple of games here at 4:05 p.m. Eastern. The first game we're going to talk about is the Los Angeles Rams hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to be at SoFi Stadium. The Pittsburgh Steelers are actually coming off of a bye week. They didn't play last week. And the Los Angeles Rams, on the flip side here, they're coming off of a tough loss here. They're 3-3. And they sit kind of at the bottom of the division. They're just ahead of Arizona at 1-5. Seattle is 3-2, and San Francisco leads the way at 5-1. The Rams, they beat the Cardinals. I apologize. They beat the Cardinals last week, but the previous week, the loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, that was a game that I feel like they could have taken because Jalen Hurts hasn't been playing that well. He didn't play that well in that game. So the Rams, to me, they've been opportunistic because that's how they beat Seattle week 1. No, now there was not a lot of expectation because of Cooper Kupp being out. And we discovered who Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell is that on that particular day. Now, Cooper Kupp has been back, and so that's kind of hurt Tutu Atwell's contribution. But Puka Nacua is still a solid number 2 receiver to have. If you're thinking about that, because he's got great statistics through these first 6 games. On the flip side for the Raiders, that game that they won last week against Baltimore, that was exactly how I expected it to be. They won that game with defense. Defense. They made things rough on Lamar Jackson last week. So this game, to me, this is a rare road meeting that the Steelers are having with the Rams. This meeting doesn't happen very often. And looking at the line here, when I look at this game, the Rams are favored by 3.5. This game is hard to call. This is much like the game I was just were talking about earlier with the Lions and Ravens. It's kind of hard to call, but I'm going to take the Rams to win this game close. I'm going to take the Rams to win this game close, very close, to 3 to 7 points, like no more than a possession. The Pittsburgh Steelers, to me, I don't question their defense by any means, but the Rams have a slightly better offense than Baltimore. Plus, the Steelers know the Ravens really well. They play each other twice a year, so the result with Steelers and Ravens last week didn't surprise me. But traveling to the Rams and not knowing them as well, and the Rams having the offense they have, I expect them to win this game close. I'm going to take the Rams to win this football game. That'll improve them to 4-3, and that'll be much needed in their division, considering San Francisco and Seattle being ahead of you. If the Rams, again, if they were to get this victory, that would put them at 4-3. Next week they're at the Dallas Cowboys at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then the following week they're at Green Bay 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So they need to win this game today because they're at Dallas, at Green Bay the next 2 weeks before they head into their bye week. So they need to win this game today with those 2 road trip games they have coming up. They've opened after their bye week. They're home against the Seattle Seahawks November 19th on CBS, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Then they're at the Arizona Cardinals. That game is 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 26th. And then they're home against the Cleveland Browns November 3rd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, like I said, they need these games before they travel onto the road the next 2 weeks. So, optimistically, as I stated with a lot of these teams, the Rams could be a 3-2 football team if they can get all the right players going and get everything in place as far as this team. This game today is going to be very pivotal, and it'll determine what they're going to look like over the next 5 to 6 weeks. So if you're the Rams, you need this because not only are you trying to keep pace in your division, you're just trying to keep pace as a whole with the 49ers. I mean, that loss kind of brought them down a little, but not enough for you to say that you got it by any means. So give me the Rams close. I'm not expecting them to blow out the Steelers, and if the Steelers can find a way to win this one, it's because they're going to have great defensive contribution, and they played well on offense. That's what Pittsburgh would need to win this game. Pittsburgh is home against the Jacksonville Jaguars, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they host the Tennessee Titans for a Thursday night game, November 2nd at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. They then host the Green Bay Packers 10 days later, 1 p.m. Eastern on November 12th before, traveling to Cleveland, November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The Pittsburgh Steelers are getting wide receiver Deontay Johnson back. He had been out since week 1 with a hamstring injury. He actually only played half of that first week against the Niners. He went out in the third quarter. So he's missed their entire schedule up until today. On the flip side, tight end Pat Freiermuth, he's being placed on IR. So they're getting a wide receiver back, but they're losing their top tight end. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they've shown me that they have a pretty awesome defense. And when the push comes to shove, that defense is ready to go. I took the Rams to win this game close because of a couple of different factors with the travel and not knowing the Rams that well. But if Pittsburgh wants to win this football game, as I've stated, they need to play as a whole football team. So we'll just have to see if they can do that. With Jacksonville, with Tennessee in the same week, hosting both of those teams, that's kind of a coup because having 2 games in 5 days is rough anyway. But having home games is what's going to make this very interesting for them. So I'll have a firm prediction for you for the Jacksonville game and also for that Tennessee Titans game. I'm liking Pittsburgh over Tennessee, even though it's about a week and a half away. But I'll have a full prediction for you at that time. And also hosting the Green Bay Packers 10 days later is going to be tough on the Green Bay Packers, especially Jordan Love. If the pressure is coming and that atmosphere is really loud, it's going to be a rough day for Jordan Love. So me personally, even after today, I could still see the Pittsburgh Steelers being 3-2 over their next 5 games, even 4-1. So I'll have a prediction for you as those games get closer. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, to me, they're going to be in a dogfight for this division. At 3-2, with Baltimore at 3-2 or 4-2, excuse me, and with Cleveland at 3-2, and Cincinnati's at 3-3, but you're not sleeping on Cincinnati. So Pittsburgh is going to be in a dogfight all year for this division, in my opinion. The AFC North is just like that. All these teams are tough in one way or another. So Pittsburgh, if they do get a win today, it'll be a full contribution from the team. or it'll because the defense made timely possession, timely plays, and timely turnovers on that offense. I'm picking the Rams in a close one today. The other 4:05 p.m. matchup we're going to talk about here is the Arizona Cardinals traveling to visit the Seattle Seahawks. That game is taking place at Lumen Field in Seattle, Washington. Seattle is actually favored by 9.5 to win this football game. That's kind of a huge line. As I've stated all season, the Cardinals they're a 1-5 football team, and this is going to sound like a slap in the face, but out of all the 1-5 football teams there are in the NFL, they're and this sounds stupid, but they're probably the best 1-5 football team. Like, look at the Patriots, look at the Broncos, look at the Giants, look at the Bears. I could see the Cardinals beating all those teams if you put them on their schedule head to head. Now, the Giants did beat the Cardinals earlier in the year, but that game was very surprising to me with Daniel Jones, the way he played in that third quarter of that game. This was back in like week 2 that the Giants beat the Cardinals. So that is the Giants' only win. But I still feel like the Cardinals are a better team. They just don't have a lot of their guys from last year, and they still have a lot of injury. Kyler Murray may not play this season either because he's still dealing with a torn ACL. He is back to practice, but he's limited in practice. So it'll be some time before they get him back. But going back to what I was talking about here with this game here today, the Seattle Seahawks, they're going to be in the mix if they get this win. They need a win. This will put them at 4-2. And depending on what the 49ers do tomorrow night against the Vikings, they'll still kind of be within striking distance of that team. As far as this game today here, I'm definitely taking Seattle with the victory over Arizona. Arizona's got, again, some feisty players, and they play great ball. I really like Michael Wilson a lot. He's a good, solid wide receiver. But like I said, they just don't have the talent to stick around with Seattle. So give me Seattle to win this football game here today. Looking at their schedule going forward, they host the Cleveland Browns next week, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before traveling to Baltimore to visit the Ravens at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS November 5th. Then they're back home to host the Washington Commanders, and that game's taking place November 12th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before they travel to the Los Angeles Rams November 19th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So the Seattle Seahawks, their schedule is kind of a mixed bag. The end of November, December is where things get really tough because after that Rams game I just mentioned, they play the Niners, the Cowboys, the Niners, the Eagles. That's going to be awful. That part right there is going to really determine if Seattle has a shot because these next 5 games could kind of go either way. You know, with the Cardinals, I got them winning today. Cleveland, they're hosting Cleveland. That's going to be tough, but with them hosting Cleveland, that could be tougher on Cleveland as far as travel. Then they're at the Baltimore Ravens. That's going to be tough on them because of travel. This is going to be a very, very, very interesting 5 to 10 weeks for the Seattle Seahawks, and it'll really determine who they're going to be as far as any kind of player in the playoffs. As far as the division goes, if you can beat San Francisco head to head, that'll really be striking. But DK Metcalf, he's been banged up, and he's been playing through a rib injury since week 2, but he also has a hip injury he's working with as well. So he's banged up here. He's gonna play today, but it's gonna be hard on Seattle. Even if with that victory, they still got some things that they need to work out as far as personnel. Arizona, if they steal this game, it'll just because they played over their skis and they played consistent, solid football with the guys they have. But Seattle is the better team in my opinion. So give me Seattle to win this game today. And then going forward here, as I stated, with the games that they have coming up after Arizona today, they could be optimistically 3-2, maybe 4-1, maybe. That would be awesome if they could pull that off because, like I said, things get tough at the end of November, heading into December. Those next 4 games, so Seattle would need to be 4-1 to keep pace. As far as the Los Angeles Rams, they placed Kyren Williams, their running back, on IR with an ankle injury after the record-breaking day he had last week. So that's going to make things tough for them. Their running game was really a large part of the reason they were able to win the games that they did. And Kyren Williams, he's been great. They just weren't sure who their running backs were prior to getting him with Cam Akers and with Darrell Henderson. Ironically, Darrell Henderson is back on the team with the injury that they have to Kyren Williams. and they're going to be using a 3 to 4 running back rotation to kind of see who's going to be doing what. Ronnie Rivers, the backup running back, he's out with a knee injury, so they're going to be down to the wire on running backs here today. Hopefully they get that figured out when they host the Pittsburgh Steelers. By the time they host the Pittsburgh Steelers next week, October 22nd at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, because the Rams then have to travel to Dallas and then to Green Bay before their bye week. So things are going to be tough on the Rams here, but if they can get their offensive going and keep guys going and doing what they need to do and get some guys back healthy, then they should be fine. The afternoon games we're going to talk about here, the Denver Broncos are hosting the Green Bay Packers. That game is taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Green Bay is favored by a point, but this game is essentially a pick'em. Green Bay is coming off of a bye week. They didn't play last week, and the Broncos' last game was actually 10 days ago. They played the Thursday nighter last week against the Kansas City Chiefs, so they've got kind of a mini bye going for them. They lost that game 19-8, and Russell Wilson didn't even throw for 100 yards passing. On the flip side, for Green Bay, they'll be getting Aaron Jones back from injury. He was listed as questionable, but he is going to play today. He hadn't played since week 1 with the hamstring injury, so he's dying to get out there. For the Denver Broncos, Greg Dulcich was placed back on IR with an injury to the hamstring, so he's going to miss at minimum another 4 games. And at this point, with him, this is his 4th hamstring injury. His 4th hamstring injury, and this is only his 2nd season in the league. So for me, that's very puzzling. The Denver Broncos just have problems pretty much everywhere. Russell Wilson has been better as a quarterback statistically speaking. He has 1,305 yards, and he has 12 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, but he also has a few fumbles in there too that have cost him the game at the wrong time. I think about the Commanders game and the Jets game. He literally fumbled late in each of those games to give that team a touchdown to either take the lead or put them in striking distance. So the Broncos, I just don't know how they fix this team. And this game, if you're a betting person, I would stay away from this game. That's just me. I would personally stay away from this game because Jordan Love and Russell Wilson are both ice cold as far as their play. They both had great starts to the season, but they just both have gone cold. This is going to be a game of attrition. I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers by 3 to win this game. The Denver Broncos have one of the worst defenses in the league, if not the worst defense based on the statistical categories, and the offense just hasn't been that great. They only scored 8 points against Kansas City. And under normal circumstances, when you hold Kansas City to 19 points, you can beat them. You can beat the Kansas City Chiefs if you can hold them to 19 points. Because this is the least that an opponent has been held to on the entire schedule outside of Oakland back in week 1. So the Broncos, they could have won that game because Kansas City didn't look that great. But when your defense is next to last, that's not going to help you. So like I said, I got Green Bay winning this football game here today. If Green Bay were to win this football game here, the following week they'd be hosting the Minnesota Vikings November 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They would then be hosting the Los Angeles Rams 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well, before traveling to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS November 12th. They would then be at home against the Los Angeles Chargers, and that game will be taking place at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. I'm sorry, on Fox. Yeah, after today, depending on what they can do against Minnesota and the Rams, hosting both of those games, if Green Bay can get on a little bit of a winning streak here, like a 3-game winning streak, that'll keep them close to Detroit. But I just don't see them winning this division. If they can win their next few games, that'll put them in what I would call wild card contention. They would be close to being a wild card team, like a 5, 6, 7 seed. That's what they would be playing for. I don't see them winning this division, but I see them as a better team than Minnesota and Chicago right now. As far as the Broncos, there's just not a lot of optimism with this team. And the Kansas City, they're going to lose to Kansas City next week before they head into their bye week. They're home against Kansas City November 29th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. They have, like I said, they have a bye week. Then for Monday Night Football, November 13th, they're at the Buffalo Bills. Then for Sunday Night Football, they host the Minnesota Vikings November 19th, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. As I've already stated, that game could get flexed out of the Sunday Night Football spot because of the fact that these teams aren't playing very well. And after Week 10, they have flex scheduling. So we'll have to see if that game stays a Sunday Night Football game. The following week, the Broncos host the Cleveland Browns at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 26th on Fox. Based on the way Cleveland has been playing up front, that game is going to be tough on Denver. That game is going to be really tough on Denver because of the way Cleveland has been playing defense. And if Deshaun Watson can get anything going with Amari Cooper, if they can get anything going out of the backfield with Jerome Ford, that could get them some points as well. I'm not going to have a prediction for that game because it's so much later in the month. It's about a month away. But Denver just hasn't shown me anything. You barely beat Chicago, and you've lost all your other games. So I don't see Denver being a factor. And for the first time in a few years, I think they're going to have a high draft pick. They're going to have a high draft pick for sure. Where they go with that draft pick is another question, but I can see Denver picking high in the 2024 draft. The next game we're going to talk about here before we touch on the Sunday Night Football game, the Chiefs are hosting the Chargers. That game is taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. That'll be on CBS later this afternoon. And the Chiefs are favored by 6 to win that football game, and that's about right. The Chiefs, they were all right against Denver, but they got the win, which is the key. And with them having played 10 days between games, they're going to probably be fresher than Justin Herbert and the Chargers. They're coming off of a disappointing Monday Night Football loss to the Cowboys. For the Cowboys, that was a great way to head into their bye week, but for the Chargers, that was just a rough loss. I don't know. That interception that Herbert threw, he may have only thrown the one interception, but it was the timing of when he threw the interception that cost the Chargers. So as far as this game here, the Los Angeles Chargers, they're going to play the Chiefs tough because this is a divisional matchup, and typically that's how those matchups go. But give me the Chiefs to win this game, and they're favored by 6, so that's about right. I think they'll cover that. I think they'll win this game by a final score of 34-27. I'm going to say they win by a touchdown, so they'll definitely cover that spread. Looking to the Chiefs' schedule, they're traveling to Denver to face the Broncos next week, October 29th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Then they have an international game that following week before they head into their bye week. They're playing against the Miami Dolphins, and that game is taking place in Germany at Frankfurt Stadium. When they return from their bye week, the Eagles for Monday Night Football, November 20th. That's going to be a great game. Then 6 days later, they're at the the Las Vegas Raiders, November 26th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So the Chiefs, to me, the Miami and Philly, those 2 games within a 3-week period with the bye week squeezed in there, that's going to be when the schedule ratchets up a bit. But as far as the Chargers and Broncos, the next 2 weeks, I got those as wins. I'm definitely curious to how they see against how they play against the Dolphins, because that's going to be an international game. That's not going to be a game played on United States soil. Excuse me, sorry. But yeah, international games are always interesting. So very curious to see how that's going to be. But the Chiefs, as I've already stated, I'm not really worried about the Chiefs. As far as what they are in the conference, I'm not worried about them at all. They also got Mecole Hardman back. They got him in a trade for a late round pick from the Jets. He wasn't really being used with the New York Jets at all, and considering he just went there, he still should know the system and how the playbook is for the Chiefs. And I think he can be an immediate contribution because they're rookies. The receivers that the Chiefs are using are rookies, second-year guys, and guys that just haven't proven anything yet. So give me the Chiefs to win today, and I think that if they can get Mecole Hardman reacclimated to that team again and reacclimated to the offense, I think that'll help them, because the receivers, you can't really count on any of those receivers, but you can definitely count on Travis Kelce. But if he's not doing anything, you need other people to contribute. So give me the Chiefs to win today. And as far as the Chargers go, this is just another example of who they are as a team, a microcosm of who they are as a franchise. They have talented players, but they can be very disappointing. Very disappointing. So I got that as a loss today. Now, they're hosting the Bears for Sunday Night Football next week at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Then they're at the New York Jets for Monday Night Football, November 6th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. They're back home 6 days later to host the Lions at 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 12th. Then they're at the Green Bay Packers, November 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So after today, I could see them beating the Chicago Bears for sure next week because they're hosting them for Sunday Night Football. And I don't even know if Justin Fields will be available. At the Jets is going to be a win as well, even though they're traveling cross country. But the Los Angeles Chargers always find a way to mess these games up that they should have. They've got a few primetime games on their schedule. So they're going to be under the spotlight quite a bit. And if these things continue to happen, I could see Brandon Staley being out of a job after the season because you just expect the Chargers to be a better football team than what they've shown. So today I got them losing to the Chiefs. If they find a way to beat the Chiefs, that'll definitely perk my ears up and that'll definitely have me paying more attention to them as to who they are because the two games that they've won have come down to coaching decisions by the other teams. Like the game that they won against the Raiders a couple weeks ago, I feel like that was Josh McDaniels making a dumb decision towards the end of the game. And the week prior to that, same thing about Kevin O'Connell with the Chargers. Even though the Chargers decided to go for it in their own end zone, the Vikings didn't make great play calling to get the touchdown and win that game. So it was just a battle of coaching blunders with that game. But the Chargers, realistically, over the next 5 games, I could see them being 2-3. I could see them beating the Bears and Jets, but with the Lions and Packers, I just don't know. I just don't know because that's the Chargers for you. That's just who they are as a team to me. They just confuse me a lot. I expect them to do certain things and they just don't. So, a couple more games we're going to talk about before we close out the broadcast. We're going to talk about the Sunday Night Football game here tonight. This game is one I've been waiting for a while. The Philadelphia Eagles are hosting the Miami Dolphins. That game is taking place at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on CBS on Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's going to be a good one. I'm really looking forward to that game. Interesting matchup as well with the quarterbacks. The Eagles, Jalen Hurts versus the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa. They're going to be forever linked as the quarterbacks for the Alabama Crimson Tide 5 years ago. They were together as the quarterbacks. And one thing that is a certainty about this game, Tua Tagovailoa can't come in for Jalen Hurts at halftime like he did at Alabama. This is going to be a head-to-head battle, but it's going to be obviously deeper than that. Miami, to me, they have a pretty awesome offense, even with Devin Achane being out the next couple of weeks of being on IR with the knee injury. You still have Tyreek Hill, you still have Jalen Waddle. Raheem Mostert has been fantastic, and you're also getting Jeff Wilson back off IR. This will be his season debut. He missed the first 6 games with various injuries to his foot, to his wrist. He had been dealing with a lot of stuff towards the end of last season. He's finally healthy. So this game is hard to call. They got Philadelphia favored by 3 in this game, and I honestly could see them winning by 3. I would be surprised if either team blew either team out, to be honest with you. I don't see a blowout for this game. And the weather's going to be fair. It's going to be probably in the low to mid 60s, decent weather. So I'm going to take Philadelphia close. I think it'll be a 37-34 victory. I think they'll win it close. Each team is 5-1, as I said, heading into this. And depending on what Buffalo does, Miami and Buffalo should be right there if Philadelphia wins this game. If Miami wins this game, it'll be because I feel as though Tua outplayed Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is not as good as he was in 2022. He already has 7 interceptions on the season, and he only had 6 all of last year. He threw 3 last week, and that was a huge contributing factor to why the Jets beat them. So, yeah, this game is going to come down to which quarterback plays better and which quarterback is more consistent, but I'm going to take the Eagles to win this game by a field goal, 37-34. I think this is going to be a shootout, and I think it's going to be a great matchup. Looking at Philadelphia's schedule beyond that, they're at the Washington Commanders next week, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, before hosting the Dallas Cowboys at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, November 5th on Fox. Philadelphia then has a bye week after that before they travel to Kansas City for Monday Night Football on November 20th. Then 6 days later, they host the Buffalo Bills, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on November 26th. That's also going to be a good game as well. So buckle your seatbelts if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. These games are going to be good from week to week. These next 5 games all have the potential to be a loss. They really do, because Miami is going to be tough. Washington's going to play you tough. The Dallas Cowboys, you see them twice a year, so you know they're going to play you tough. You have a bye week, but then you have to travel to Kansas City for Monday Night Football. They're going to be ready. The Buffalo Bills are going to be waiting for you 6 days later. So it's really hard to say what Philadelphia is going to do beyond tonight, because I honestly don't even know if they'll win tonight. I'm just saying they're going to win, but if the Dolphins beat them, don't be shocked, because the Dolphins have been playing fantastic football all year. So forgive me, Philadelphia, to win, but as this thing comes week to week, we're definitely going to have to see what they do, because I just don't know if they'll win any of those games. At the same time, they're not going to be favored to lose either. So Philadelphia, that's going to be tough. That's really going to be tough to see what their schedule looks like, but I'll be calling it week to week for you. As I said, the Dolphins, they'll be home against the New England Patriots next week, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They travel to Germany to face the Chiefs November 5th, and that's at 9:30 a.m. Eastern before they head into their bye week. When they return from their bye week, they're hosting the Las Vegas Raiders, excuse me. I'm used to calling them Los Angeles and Oakland and all that. They'll be hosting the Raiders November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS, and then they'll be heading to the New York Jets November 24th. And that game is going to be taking place on Black Friday. They're going to be having some games on Black Friday this year, so they hadn't done that before. But this game is actually going to be on Prime Video because it's considered a Thursday night broadcast, but it's technically the 24th, which is a Friday, and that game is at 3 p.m. Eastern, so 1 p.m. Local time, Mountain Time, noon Pacific Time. So yeah, that's the beauty about the Miami Dolphins, that they've shown a lot of promise, but at the same time, they've been blown out by the Buffalo Bills already. So they've beaten bad teams. That's one thing about the Miami Dolphins, and part of the reason why I'm taking Philadelphia is that they've beaten bad teams. The Carolina Panthers are 0-6. The Giants are 1-5. The Denver Broncos are 1-5. The New England Patriots are 1-5. The only team that's viable that they've beaten was the Los Angeles Chargers week 1, and the Los Angeles Chargers are 2-3. So they haven't beaten a good team yet. This victory is really needed more for Miami than it is for Philly. And if Miami could get this team, that'll prove that they're for real. Their offense has been rolling, but like I said, you haven't beaten a proven team. None of those teams that you've played except for Buffalo are going to the playoffs. So a victory for Miami tonight would not just be a moral victory, but it would be a huge victory and a huge confidence booster for this team. The Patriots, I got them winning that game that following week before they travel to face the Chiefs. That game is a pick-em as far as I'm concerned because of the international aspect. And we'll talk about that game as we get closer. A bye week before the Raiders, I think they'll beat the Raiders up considering that they're hosting them. And then at the Jets, that's not going to be a huge deal, but because it's just a 5-day turnaround, it may be. So we'll have to see. But looking at the Dolphins, if they can realistically go 3-2, if they can go 4-1 even over these next 5 games, that'll be huge heading into December for them. So watch out for the Dolphins. We'll just have to see what they are, but they need to beat a contender. All the teams that they've beaten this year are bad teams. So we'll just have to see what they are. The Eagles, I have confidence in them, and we're seeing what they're going to be, but things happen week to week. So we'll just have to see what they are as well. But give me the Eagles tonight close. Miami hasn't beaten a contender yet. So if that can happen tonight, that'll prove that they're really worth it. The final game we're going to talk about before we close out the broadcast is the Monday night football matchup. The Minnesota Vikings will be hosting the San Francisco 49ers. That's at 8:15 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night on ABC and ESPN. For Purdy, this was his Brock Purdy and the 49ers. This was Brock Purdy's first loss of his career. He started out his career really well with the 49ers. And after the way that they beat up on Dallas 2 weeks prior, or 2 weeks ago, they just looked really sluggish last week against Cleveland. Christian McCaffrey went out with an injury. Deebo Samuel went out with an injury, and Trent Williams went out with injuries. Deebo Samuel is listed as out for this game tomorrow night, and Trent Williams is listed as doubtful. So there's a possibility the game as well. He's dealing with a really bad ankle injury that he suffered. So it's interesting. The 49ers, they looked very invincible until they saw Cleveland for some reason. That's really interesting to me. Like I said, Cleveland has a great great defense, because that front line is really great at attacking the front seven as a whole is really great at attacking the quarterback and just closing that pocket. But the offense, if they can get that offense going, they would be a great team. So Looking at this game here, I'm going to take the 49ers to bounce back and get this victory over the Vikings. The Vikings are 2-4. They're still going to be without Justin Jefferson. He's on IR, so he's going to miss another few games. And the running game just has not been there for this team. Alexander Madison, he only has 320 rushing yards through 6 games. That's not going to work for them. He's averaging about 50 yards a game when you extrapolate that. That's not very good. So if Alexander Madison can get going at all, that'll really help out Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has 14 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. But a large part of that is because you had Jefferson on the field. He missed a game last week against Chicago, but they won that game with defense. So I'm going to take the 49ers to win this football game tonight. If Minnesota can show anything on offense, that'll help. But I'm looking at the Niners to win this game. They're not going to have Deebo Samuel, but it looks like McCaffrey's going to play. And with Trent Williams, we'll have to see if he's available. We won't really know more until tomorrow. But give me the Niners to win this game. 6 days later, they're hosting the Cincinnati Bengals at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on October 29th before they head into their bye week. After their bye week, they're at the Jacksonville Jaguars, November 12th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're back home to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on November 19th on Fox before they host Seattle for the game on Thanksgiving. They play the Thanksgiving night game that following Thursday at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Thanksgiving evening. So looking at the next 5 games, San Francisco, in my opinion, will be at worst 3-2. The Jacksonville game, I'm not going to sleep on Jacksonville because, again, Jacksonville has shown me that they're a lot tougher than I realized. I thought they were going to be a good team to start, but they've shown toughness and resiliency. So give me the Niners and Jacksonville game. That's going to be a tough game, and I'll have an official prediction for you when that game happens. And then at Seattle is always going to be tough. That's a Thanksgiving Day game, and it's a divisional opponent. So, San Francisco, if they can even win these next 5 games all in a row, that'll solidify things as them being the top seed in the NFC, in my opinion. But we'll just have to see. Things happen from week to week. So San Francisco, give me them to win this football game tonight. And as far as Minnesota, let's look at their next 5 games here before we close out the broadcast here today. They're at Green Bay, then they're at Atlanta the next 2 weeks. So they're hosting San Francisco for Monday Night Football, but then they got to travel the next couple weeks. They'll be at Green Bay November 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox in a divisional matchup. Then they're at the Atlanta Falcons November 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. They do come home to host the Saints 1 p.m. Eastern November 12th before they travel back to Denver 8:20 p.m. Eastern, November 19th for Sunday Night Football. I've already said that may not be a Sunday Night Football game by the time we get there based on the teams and the way they're playing, but for now, that's where it's scheduled. As far as the Minnesota Vikings, I could see them being 2-3 over these next 5 games. At Atlanta in a couple weeks, I could see them taking that. I could see them taking that game and then hosting the Saints. They could take that game as well. Because the Saints, they've been very underwhelming and very inconsistent on offense. And I like Minnesota's offense better. They could have Justin Jefferson back possibly by then. At the latest, he would be back for the Chicago Bears game after they host or are at Denver. So Minnesota, I think their key is if they can get solid defensive play and if they can run the football. They have not had a running game all year. Dalvin Cook was something that teams used to worry about because he could run the football really well and catch the football out of the backfield. But he's not that guy anymore, or at least he hasn't been for the Jets. And Madison hasn't taken his place well at all. So as far as the Vikings go, we're just going to have to see. But I just don't see them being a factor in the conference at all, let alone their division. So give me the Niners to win this game. And as far as the Vikings, they're probably going to go 2-3 over the next 5 games. So that wraps up today's. We went over the highlights for the Jaguars and Saints. We went over all the games for today, and I gave you a prediction for tomorrow. As I said, there's 6 teams on bye week: the Bengals, Cowboys, Titans, Jets, Panthers, and Texans. So that kind of shortens the game slate for today. The next broadcast is going to be on Tuesday. We'll go over all the results of today's results, and we'll go over the results for that Monday Night Football game. And we'll take a sneak peek and see who the Thursday Night Football game is to kick off Week 8. That's going to be the Bills hosting the Buccaneers. I won't have a prediction for that game until Thursday's broadcast. Thursday is typically the abbreviated, shorter broadcast. So I'll have an official prediction for that game here. But that wraps up today's broadcast. Be sure and enjoy today's games. There's already some games already taking place and some scores hitting the scoreboard. So if you're not watching already, go ahead and check those games out. And like I said, I'll have a wrap up for you for all of today's games and the Monday Night Football game on Tuesday for you. That wraps up today's broadcast for The Hype Show. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I do appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and like and comment on this video. And if you're not new, thank you again for showing up here as you always do. I truly appreciate it. That wraps up today's episode. And again, this is The Hype Show. Thank you so much. You have a great day. Thank you.